Who are you? That's what we're talking about today. Identity. Today I'm joined by Mariana. This is a one of us episode. So Mariana shares her story about the highs and lows of jumping from identity to identity. We talk about what even is identity to begin with. How can we kind of make more sense of who we are and what that even means? We talk about what happens when the thing you've placed your security in is taken away, how to figure out what your identity is currently in. I share an essay that I wrote about how I think our identity is like a house. We talk about the Scottie Scheffler recent interview and how Mariana and I have found our identity now in something that is stable, that is not going away. And lastly, we talk about the differences between the cultural view of what identity is and what it means versus the Christian view. And this is definitely especially the second half, a faith, God heavy episode. But just like the whole theme of Quarter Life Clarity, where we're sharing people's experiences, we're sharing Mariana's experiences, my experiences with this whole thing called identity. And it's obviously such an important topic as us quarter lifers are figuring out our place in the world, figuring out who we are and all this stuff. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. I think this is a really good one, a really important one. It's definitely pretty heart heavy. So yeah, hope you enjoy it. In Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights book, he writes about his backpacking journey to the Amazon River. And at the time of him writing this, or kind of just seeking out the Amazon River, he was actually in the very early stages of his kind of overnight fame and success. So in the book, he writes, and this is related to the topic we're talking about today, obviously. In my tent, grappling with my demons, I couldn't sleep, so I quit trying to. Instead, I stripped off my clothes, along with every badge, banner, expectation, and affiliation I had on me. I discarded my American baseball cap that was my totem to patriotism, the Celtic knot pendant that symbolized my Irish heritage, the Lone Star flag amulet that stood for my Texas pride. I don't know what an amulet is. And every other mascot of inspiration from adventures past. I removed every idol that ever gave me comfort and security, pride, or confidence. All the window dressings and representations, the packaging around my product was gone. I even punched myself in the face a couple of times for good measure. Who was I? Not only on this trip, but in this life. So I started there because, one, I just love that book. But yeah, I mean, exactly what that scene represents is like, he literally stripped himself down, literally, but obviously figuratively in his mind of like, who am I? Who am I right now? Who am I in this life, especially dealing with success? You know, he kind of had that moment. And I think for us, for the quarter lifer, that's something that is really real for us. It's really real. It's who am I outside of my job title, my relationship, what I look like, what I do, all those things. And I think if you strip all those things away, we might not know the answer. I might not know the answer. You know what I mean? So I think it's such an important topic. It's identity. It's who really am I? And I think for the purpose of this conversation, defining identity is kind of important to start. And just to go off of what McConaughey wrote, like, to me, it's really, where do I get that comfort, security, and confidence from? So I think just as the listener, as you're hearing Mariana and I talk about this, where do you get that comfort, security, and confidence from? That's really what identity is. And also, just a stat on this whole thing, 75% of adults aged 25 to 33 report having experienced a quarter life crisis. And that's a lot. But I think the quarter life crisis is really an identity crisis. And so super, super important topic that we're talking about today. So Mariana has a great story about kind of all this that ties into identity. So Mariana, like, let's go back a little bit. Where did you first start to struggle with identity?
When it comes to identity, I think I really started to struggle once I was in college. This was the first time I was away from home. I was only an hour and a half away from home, but still far enough where I was kind of on my own, and I came from a background of very strict Hispanic parents. So this was the first time where I got to kind of explore and do whatever I wanted and kind of go off and do my own thing. So right off the bat, freshman year, I joined a sorority, which a lot of people either don't know about me, or once they learn that, they're like, really? You were a sorority girl? You don't give off that vibe, which I'm not really sure what that means. But I was like, yeah, I joined a sorority. And now looking back, it was because I wanted to find a friend group and I wanted to fit in and I wanted to belong, because it wasn't something that I necessarily had a lot of growing up. I never had like the big girlfriend group and people to always hang out with. So I was like, okay, let me join a sorority and let me find my people. That was pretty short-lived. So I only lasted like 2 years in the sorority, just because even then I felt like an outsider within this group of women, which again, no hate towards sororities. I think they have their time and place and people find really great bonds there, but that just wasn't my experience. So, okay, I didn't have that friend group. I had other friends here and there, but again, not that solidified friend group. So I was like, okay, I'm not a sorority girl. That identity, or so I wanted, was no longer the right fit for me. From there, I was always kind of like a bookworm. Like I always did really well in school. I really pride myself in my work ethic when it came to my studies. So even throughout college, like, yeah, I would go out and party and, hang out with friends and do all of the college scene. But I was still at my 8 a.m. the next day, because ingrained in me was that identity portion of like, I need to be a really good student and I need to make sure I'm getting good grades.
I cannot say the same.
No? I was very much fixated on, I need to show up to class. Like, I'm paying money to be here. My parents, made a way for me to be here. So I'm going to take this very seriously.
Yeah, part of your identity.
Right. Yeah. And I'm super grateful for that. But again, I put a lot of myself into school. Not to say that it wasn't worth it, but I was finding my identity in my schoolwork and in my studies. And then at the same time, I was also in a long-term relationship. So almost end of freshman year through all of my college experience, I was in a relationship. So a big part of my identity became this relationship. So I would say in college, that was when it first kind of kicked off, where I'm trying to figure out, where do I belong? What should I be focusing my time in? Who am I becoming? What am I doing? And I think that's the question that a lot of college kids have. And I think once you graduate, it only gets even deeper, because then you're out in the world. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. And as you're kind of sharing that, I'm thinking about my college experience where, I played baseball in college. That was a huge part of my identity. Also was in a relationship for most of my college career. And it's like, between those two things, amidst the partying and just being in college, like it felt like that I was good. Like my cup was full from those things. And so, yeah, but then you leave college, and for me, right, baseball goes away, relationship ends like a year later, but like you kind of start to shed those things that you grew up with, that identity that you've formed from just growing up. And then you kind of, maybe like you and I did, you get to that point where it's like, whoa, who actually am I outside of those things? And so what next for you? Like, all right, you've left college. Did you find your identity in something else then?
Yeah, it shifted to the next thing. So I graduated with my undergrad. I got my master's right after, so I was technically in school for 5 years, all at UConn. So I was in the same environment, same space for an extra year, which was nice. Got a little extra year of not having to figure out who I am yet. So I graduate with my master's, and that fall, so fall of 2019, I go into my teaching career. First year teaching. I have a very unique opportunity in my first teaching job that I had, which is very rare for most teachers, where I had a split position. So I was teaching high school and middle school at the same time. So I would start my day in the middle school, and then I would head to the high school to finish off the second half of my day. So sure enough, I go full force into work and teacher mode. And as a first year teacher, here I am at 23 years old teaching high schoolers. Like, immediately my identity needed to shift from, I'm no longer a college kid. I am the adult in the room. So I felt in a unique way, and I think other teachers could relate, you kind of have to grow up real fast in that moment, because now you're responsible for teenagers and their identity struggles and their upbringing and how they're, going to be influenced by you. So I took that on very personally, and I made sure, like, I don't care if I'm a first year teacher, I'm going to put all my effort into this job. And it was absolutely exhausting. So I was like staying up till midnight, 1 a.m., writing lesson plans and grading and it became my identity. Teaching became everything all at once. And it was exhausting because I no longer had a sight of like, who am I? I'm just a teacher. That's it. All I do is teaching. My weekends, all I did was something teaching related. And I was really running on empty for a lot of my first year as a teacher. And that is a common experience, unfortunately. But then, as we all know, 2020 comes along and COVID hits. So I'm at home for the end of the spring semester of my first year of teaching. And I'm like, well, now I don't really feel like a teacher anymore because I'm not in that space. Sure, I'm still teaching online, but if you were in school or if you taught, like, that was kind of a joke, honestly. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm still a teacher, but this feels foreign now. Like, I kind of got into a rhythm and routine, and then it all kind of just like got snatched away. And I'm like, and around that time was when my long-term relationship kind of fell apart. And so here I am with my teaching kind of being this experience that I'm not used to anymore. I don't have a relationship that I was kind of depending on that I had for the last 5 years of my life. And I'm back home because I moved back in with my parents. So I'm kind of almost like regressing in my identity because I don't have anything to cling onto, which is why then is when I kind of turned to fitness. So that was kind of like the next jumping point. So from college to teaching to fitness is when that identity with that kind of began.
Yeah, and before we get into like the fitness journey, and maybe before we jump ahead to that, I'm just trying to think about kind of my own experiences here with identity, and I think around that same time frame, I definitely, like, COVID happens. I lost the relationship around that same time. I was working a lot, and I think, yeah, the first year, I think even just outside of teaching, for me, it was like, yeah, you really do have to grow up so fast, and you just have to be a professional. When 6 months ago I was blacking out on a Tuesday, like I think it's different. It's weird. You have to become this new person so quick, and kind of like you and I did, you almost, I don't want to say overcorrect, but you want to do a good job. You want to, because you grew up, being good in school and being, just doing a good job in most of the things that you put your mind to, you don't want to also let other people down. So there's a lot of identity, right? Confidence and security that comes from that. And I think with your story, with my story, COVID happens, the whole time aspect that we can spend on certain things like that we get our identity from, kind of starts to go away amidst the relationship for you, the actual act of going to school and teaching. And so, yeah, like, talk to me more about, all right, those pieces of your identity start to get stripped away, and you're kind of then, are you like scrambling a little bit to find something, and that's when you kind of jumped into fitness?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we want to cling on to something. We want to have something that we can control. And I think that's just in human nature in general. So I didn't have a career that I could control. I didn't have relationship that I had any kind of control in anymore. Not to say I was like controlling a relationship, but just, the idea of like, okay, security. I have this and security. Right. So I was thinking like, well, what can I fill the void with? What can I do next? What can I cling on to next? So at the start of 2020, I had started to work out and trying to get in shape because I gained a lot of weight in college. And afterwards I was like, okay, obviously it's not healthy anymore, but I was no longer doing the same habits as I was in college. So naturally, like, I did lose weight, and then I was with teaching, I wasn't eating well. So I was just like, let me try and wrap my head around what fitness is and how to eat properly. And now that I have the time, because I'm not teaching in a building and have all these extra stressors on me, I decided to devote time into figuring out, like, how do I track macros? What does that even mean? And like really researching how to do that. And I was doing like online workouts during COVID. And it's so funny. Like, I think on my social media page, just way, way far back, I was doing like makeshift home workouts. So I literally had like resistance bands and like using broom handles to like do rows. It's actually hysterical. But at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to cling to this. This is my new comfort now. This is my new identity. I'm going to just go full on fitness mode. I would go on like 3-mile walks in the morning during COVID, and then I would come home and I would do an online workout class, and then I would teach online, and then late in the afternoon I would do another workout class, and it was just filling this void of it's something else to do. But in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm also still doing something positive. It's not like I'm just sitting around watching Netflix for 12 hours of the day, which a lot of people did. And again, no judgment here. Like, no one knew what was going on. So you were just doing the best you could with what you had. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm getting healthier, and this isn't a negative at all. Like, eating healthy, drinking my water, going for walks, like, awesome. I got this. Like, COVID, what? Who cares? Like, right. I'm in the best shape of my life, so I'm good. And again, pros and cons to putting your identity in things. And so for a long time, and I know we'll get more into this, but fitness became my backbone. And I was like, this is my identity now. I got this. And sure enough, over time, that's going to get stripped away too.
Yeah, it's such a fine line because, like you said, it's a good thing to be healthy and fit and care about your body and just being healthy. But yeah, when it becomes your identity, you make it like an ultimate thing, and we'll get into this, but I think a good like warning sign for that is like if you miss a day or you like something with that thing that you put your identity in goes wrong, like that makes you feel terrible. I think that's just a warning sign. But yeah, it's a fine line, and I think when you make it the ultimate thing, that's really where it becomes a problem. Like, you can enjoy it, you can love it, you can have all that, but when you make it the end all be all, that's where it really becomes part of your identity, and that's when you ride the roller coaster of the highs and lows of that thing, and that's outside of you.
Yeah, speaking of highs and lows, I think when it comes to a fitness journey, that's bound to happen. But because I was consistently hitting so many highs, so during that time in COVID, I got really disciplined and structured with my workouts. Fall time, back into school mode, back into teaching, but I maintained the fitness lifestyle. So I was going to the gym at 4 or 5 a.m., getting my workouts in, teaching for a full day, and then sometimes even doing another workout in the afternoons. And it got to a point, kind of like what you mentioned earlier, like you're taking it too far sometimes, and it did become almost obsessive for me. But because I was hitting these highs, like I was gaining muscle and I was getting stronger, and I continued to hit PRs, and I just kept getting better. And in my eyes, I was like, well, I have to keep doing this now. And again, it's almost like a personal high of like, I just want to hit the next thing and I want to hit the next summit. And it was great for a really long time. And it got to a point where I was also sharing actively on social media. And it was a lot for my own personal gain at first, because I was able to track my workouts and keep myself accountable and be motivational for other people. And that, for a long time, I stuck true to that. And then I would say I started powerlifting, and that's kind of where almost another shift in identity happened, where I was working with a powerlifting coach, and I was really intentional with my workouts and with my eating. And kind of to your point before, like if I missed a workout, like I was crushed. I was like, I won't go to this social event, or I won't go do this because I have goals I need to hit, and I'm not going to let myself derail from that. And again, if you're in a competition prep or something like that, it's a totally different mindset that I haven't even stepped into really. But in my own way, I kind of was very strict with myself. And I had a powerlifting coach, and I was hitting like really good numbers for squats and deadlifts and benching. And I was very proud of myself. But at the same time, like it became so obsessive where I would get to the gym, and if I didn't hit the number that my coach had said I needed to hit, I was mad. Like I was like upset, like I would cry, I would just like kind of blow up emotionally, and I would just kind of feel internally like, oh, I'm just not good at this. Like what's the point? Like I can't even do this thing that my coach told me to do, and I'm not hitting it. And so I'm not even really that good at the gym, or I'm not as strong as I think I am. And so again, pouring my identity into these lifts and into getting stronger essentially led to disappointment because I was going to fail. But because I had been doing so well for so long, I didn't know how to deal with failure at that point. And in the same vein, like sharing on social media had its perks, and I was meeting all these people, and I was getting great attention and great validation from men, women, older people, like younger females. So again, to the same extent where I was like, I'm doing something good for the community. Like I am helping others feel motivated or feel like they can do this too, because I at one point started at 0, and here I am squatting 315 pounds and feeling like a rock star. But then comes the issue of, well, if I'm getting my validation from random people on the internet or from strangers that I don't know, like what is that actually giving me when I don't have that? Or if people say negative things about me, because then there's that too. It's like it makes you question your identity yet again. If people are saying like, oh, that's your form's not good, or that doesn't even look like that much, or you're on steroids, or accusing you of things, and it makes you take a step back of like, wait, am I actually any good at this? Yet again, like, should I even be doing this? So I think there's a lot there when it comes to identity and like, do I like doing this? Am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I doing this because I'm used to it for so long at this point? And eventually I got to a point where I got injured when I was deadlifting, and that really crushed my spirit in a way, because at that point I was prepping for a powerlifting meet, and I was really excited about it. It was going to be my first meet ever. Like I was telling my friends about it, and like, you have to come out and see this. And I was prepping for it, and I ended up getting hurt pretty bad, to the point where like I couldn't even put shoes on. Like I couldn't drive extended periods of time without my lower back like being in so much pain. So I had to stop deadlifting and squatting for like 6 months and just had to put a stop to it. And I was just destroyed. I was like, well, what do I do? Like, or what do I even post on social media? Because all these people know me as a power lifter or as this girl that's hitting all these numbers, and I can't do that anymore. So now what? And so again, making it obsessive and putting your all into something can be great, but if that's all you have, at some point or another, it's going to get stripped away.
Yeah, and there's so much there, and can we kind of dive into a little bit more of, how did that feel? You're this person, especially publicly on social media. You're this person to so many people and fully to yourself, your identity, your security, your confidence, kind of what gives you joy, things that you're working towards. Again, these kind of good things that are making you more disciplined. A lot of good things are kind of going on, but again, you're making that ultimate thing, and then it's stripped away. You can't do it anymore. And I'm sure that was kind of like you said, like destructive internally. You literally you probably couldn't do much, not just lifting, but in general. So can you talk to me a little bit more about kind of what that felt like?
Yeah, I think the first word that kind of pops into my head going back to thinking about how I felt was really just kind of this feeling of worthless, of like, well, I tied so much of my worth into doing all of these things fitness related, and now I can't. so what good am I? Like, what am I actually good at anymore? And even like trying to be motivational online through those challenging months, I remember posting things and being like, but that's not actually how I feel. Like, I feel like crap. Like, I don't like who I am right now because I'm not doing the things that brought me what I thought was joy and what I thought made me like myself. It was all of these external accomplishments that I liked. So it kind of made me face like, do I even like myself? Do I like who I am if I don't have this? And a lot of those questions kind of flooded in where it was like, well, what do I do now? Or who do I become now? Or what's the next thing that I can do if I don't have fitness? Because again, I was trying to fill this void of how do I make myself seem valuable? Because it was tied before to a number on a lift or to a certain aesthetic look. That's where my value was being tied to. And so it was just, it was just a sense of like worthlessness of like, well, I don't have any fulfillment in myself really, in just who I am as a person because, and at this point in my, tying it back to teaching, I wasn't very content in my teaching career. So I wanted nothing to do with my work life. So, and I was again still living at home, which was its own mental struggle, as I know, you're familiar with. So it's like, okay, I don't want to deal with work life. My relationships with men and dating were atrocious also. So I don't have that. And it's like the one thing that I had and that gets taken away from me. Like now what do I do? And it's a crappy feeling to, and I know many people feel this at some point where it's like, well, what now? What? Like, you're kind of just like, I just think of myself just kind of like sinking down into a chair and like into this like shell of what do I have to put out there now? And again, like you said, having a presence on social media, it's like, well, I have to keep putting out content. I have to keep showing up. I have to keep doing something so other people continue to validate me because I don't feel validated in myself any longer. So it was, not just physically, but like mentally, spiritually, like in every possible way. It just felt like everything was just kind of crumbling down. And the structure that I thought I had in fitness, again, something that we mentioned is good, no longer was benefiting me in the way that I thought it was going to.
Yeah, and just that chasing the accomplishment, chasing the validation. We've talked a lot about success the past few weeks on this podcast, and something that happened last week is Scottie Scheffler kind of went viral by saying a few things just about his perspective on success and kind of like why is he doing what he's doing. And I think it really does hit on identity pretty hard. So I just want to share, I think it was a great clip. I just want to try and share. I'm going to do what I've done before and pick up my laptop and try and play the actual clip for you guys.
I'm not here to inspire somebody else to be the best player in the world because what's the point? This is not a fulfilling life. It's fulfilling from the sense of accomplishment, but it's not fulfilling from a sense of like the deepest, places of your heart. There's a lot of people that make it to what they thought was going to fulfill them in life, and then you get there and all of a sudden you get to number one in the world and then they're like, what's the point? And I really do believe that because what is the point? You're like, why do I want to win this tournament so bad? That's something that I wrestle with on a daily basis. It's like showing up at the Masters every year. It's like, why do I want to win this golf tournament so badly? Why do I want to win the Open Championship so badly? I don't know, because if I win, it's going to be awesome for about 2 minutes. And then we're going to get to the next week and it's going to be like, hey, you won 2 majors this year. How important is it for you to win the FedEx Cup playoffs? And it's just like, we're back here again, So we really do. We work so hard for such little moments. And, I'm kind of a sicko. I love putting in the work. I love being able to practice. I love getting out to live out my dreams. But at the end of the day, sometimes I just don't understand the point, because I don't know if I'm making any sense or not, but no, am I not? It's just...
I'll stop it there. But it's a great interview, and I think it definitely ties to like your story, Mariana, where you reach these high highs, these accomplishments, and it's awesome, but for how long, right? You're always chasing the next high, whatever that is for you and your respective identity thing that you're after. And I think on the flip side too, the way I see that video is whether you win or lose, there is still an empty feeling that kind of comes with it. And I think that's a result of putting our identity, for Scottie Scheffler, making winning a golf tournament his end all be all. And Scottie is a Christian. He's talked about that. So he has something greater than that kind of trumps that. But I mean, I've talked about Rory McIlroy winning the Masters, and such one of my favorite sports moments ever. Drops down to his knees and like accomplishes like his lifelong dream, and it was an awesome moment. But as I've talked about before, he's got to wake up on Monday. He's got to wake up a week from then, a month from then, a year from then. And I think the difference in managing such a high well versus not well is just that. It's making it, is that the end all be all? Is that the thing that gives me value? I accomplished this thing. Now, all right, finally, like I'm good. I have value. I'm secure in this. I've finally gotten there. And, on the flip side for your story, if you kind of almost like don't get there or have something go wrong with that thing, if Rory McIlroy or Scottie Scheffler had a career-ending injury, you see this in sports all the time, it really, really destroys people because their identity was found in that thing. And so to go back to you, Mariana, with your story, then what, right? You get injured, you're dealing with all these serious emotions of like, who am I? What am I doing with my life? My career's not that great. COVID's still kind of going on. I had this thing that gave me my security and joy and all this stuff. And now I kind of have none of it. And I'm just kind of like, the relationship's gone too. Like, then what?
Yeah, and it's a big then what, because I at the moment I didn't have the next thing lined up. I didn't have something in my back pocket where I could be like, oh, let me just go back to this. Right. And so, kind of hitting upon the whole Christianity aspect. I grew up in church. I grew up as a Christian. During COVID, obviously, when things were shut down, I didn't go to church, and it took me some time to kind of get back into going regularly. And I found a church where I was at the time where all of this was happening. And even then, I was just kind of going through the motions of being a follower of Christ. I was going to church on Sundays and then leaving, and that was it. That was the extent of my interaction with God. And also around this time, I had a TikTok account that was, again, tied to my fitness life that did really, really well. I had like 50,000 followers. I had all these videos. I had a lot of engagement, and I was still posting a lot on that because I was like, okay, well, I might be injured, but I can still make videos and make content of my other fitness accomplishments because I have videos from the past. Like I can still, at least use that to now create this new kind of identity portion, and it all ties together. So I'm posting on TikTok. It's doing really well. Like I have all these followers, and I'm finding validation in that during the time that I'm dealing with this injury. So it feels like it's okay. This is my new little security blanket. And then I don't remember exactly time frame when it was, but it's also around the same time where I'm trying to get closer to God, and I'm trying to get myself back into relationship with God again. And I just remember praying like, help me see the things that are in the way, or like what's an obstacle. And shortly after, I get locked out of my TikTok account. Like I'm not able to get back in. I couldn't get a new password. I just could not for the life of me get back into that account. And I just had to kind of like accept defeat at that point where I'm like, all right, well, I tried contacting TikTok. I literally tried everything to get it back and I couldn't. And I remember, and at this point, like I was dating my now fiance, and I remember like being so distraught to the point where he like wasn't getting it. He's like, I don't know why you're so upset about like a TikTok account. And in the moment, I was distraught because that's where I had just placed my new identity. I was like, I had all of this validation. I had this value tied to a bunch of strangers on the internet, and that just got ripped away from me. Like it was like the last thing I had almost. It was just one of those like, well, that was all I had. And for a good month, like I remember just being so upset over this silly social media account. But that was like the catalyst. And now looking back, it's like, okay, I know God intervened in that moment and was like, you have been jumping from identity to identity, from thing to thing, and you're finding yourself in the same cycle. You know, it gets taken away, and then you're upset and you're depressed and you are at your lowest, and then you cling on to something else. And it just kind of felt like, I just remember thinking like, oh, this is his lending hand. Like this is him actually like reaching for me. And it's no longer, I have to find validation and or identity in all of these other areas. He's like, I'm here. Like I've been here. And like, I want you to see that you can have identity in me, and that he was there all along. But because I had ignored it, I wasn't tapping into the identity that God wanted me to have this entire time.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And I felt that too in my own journey. Like all these things get ripped away and it's brutal. And you're like, I don't know. For me, it was like my belief system. Who am I? Like just miserable, relationship, all these things go away. And so I know what my experience was like. What did that feel like to almost feel God's hand over you while all these things are getting ripped away? Like, I'm sure there was a lot of not weird comfort, but like in the midst of this chaos, feeling that comfort that like God has got me.
Yeah, I think just like you said, it's kind of like this underlying something in you that kind of starts to stir, where it's like you can kind of breathe a little easier, and you have that sense of, okay, maybe I am okay, and maybe I don't need X, Y, or Z thing. And I think it also comes down to, are you willing to trust it? Are you not trust it, but like trust this sense of comfort that God is trying to give you? Are you willing to trust him now? And it's now you have that decision, because once you kind of feel that, it's like, well, do I want to lean into this? Because I very well could have been like, okay, yeah, cool, whatever, God, but I'm going to go find something else now that is tangible and that I can cling to right now, because I want reassurance and validation right now. And had I done that, I don't think I would have had the security that I now have in Christ. But yeah, to your point, you feel that sense of peace almost, that you're like, you don't know how it's going to work out or what it even means, but you're like, okay, God, like, let's kind of see what happens. Like and you know, that was a big wake up call for me, where it forced me to look back and notice my own wrongdoings, and kind of, it definitely humbled me, where it's like, you know, your lifts and your performance and your accomplishments, they're great and that's awesome. And, you know, you can be proud of yourself, but kind of to the point of the golfer, like so what? Yeah. Then what? You did those things, but there's so much more out there, and there's a life and a peace that God wants you to experience and have, that you won't tap into if you don't let go of these other identities.
Quick interruption. If you're enjoying this episode and you found it valuable, my one ask is that you share it with a friend. I think the only way that this thing really grows and Quarter Life Clarity makes the impact that I believe it can and will have is if people like you take a second to send it to someone who you think might also find it valuable. And I know when we send people podcasts, we think we're sending them work. I've been there. It feels like that 100%. And I always like to say, if I'm sending them a long podcast, hey, man, I know you might not have 90 minutes to kill, but I found this valuable. And if you listen to it, great. If not, that's okay. Have a great day. That's all it needs to be. And if you haven't found it valuable, then that's okay. Like, don't send it to a friend. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the rest of the episode. Yeah, and I think you have to, things get stripped away. I mean, generally speaking, like, just bad things happen to you that your identity is tied to, and then you feel like shit, and it's like, what? And you don't know where to go. And I think I feel like, I don't know, I mentioned this in the past, maybe it was my episode 1 or Hiram's episode 3, but those, to your point, those things happening are a sign that, like, God's kind of saying, hey, like, look at me, you know, all these things.
Like, redirect yourself.
Yeah, right. Like, I am here. And it's such a loving hand and just such a comforting feeling. Like, to go back to the Scottie thing, you know, he talks about, it doesn't satisfy the deepest desires of my heart. Like, question for you, when things were at its very, 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 very best in your fitness journey, anything along those lines, did it satisfy the deepest desires of your heart?
No. I thought it did, but because I was always thinking of the next thing, it almost felt like it was so short-lived. Like, that accomplishment felt great. Again, like, for a second, for a couple minutes, for the rest of that day. But then the next day I would wake up and be like, okay, well, what's the next thing that I have to do now? What's the next accomplishment? So it felt great for a very short-lived moment, but then it kind of went back to, okay, well, but what's next?
It's so fleeting.
It is.
Everything
it
is
really
fleeting.
is.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, just on the whole identity, Christianity, to zoom out a little bit, I mean, just in preparation for this episode, such a big topic that we're trying to tackle, I was just thinking about this whole idea myself of just like, what even is identity? Who are you? Okay, like, deeper than that, how can we make this a little bit more tangible? And I was struggling for a bit of just, how do we portray, like, how do we talk about this? And I realized it was so hard for me to land on just what identity is, because the worldly cultural view of identity is so different than the Christian view of identity. And having, like, myself being a Christian too, it was like, yeah, that's what it is. That's why I'm having such a hard time figuring this out. And to go back to the green lights passage that we kick things off with, the next line in that passage, you know, he says, who was I, not only on this trip, but in this life? The next line that Matthew McConaughey says is, now naked and stripped down to nothing, I was only a child of God and nothing more. And I feel like it's such a good representation of us when you're stripped down to everything physically, figuratively. Who are you? And that was his realization. And I think from a Christian perspective, what identity really is it's rooted in who God is, versus the worldly cultural perspective is rooted in, like, things like your, like, fitness, like how I look, like the job title that I have, I'm a father, I'm a son, all those things. And even like myself, right? That's a big thing. And I think, to your point, to your story, when you put your identity in those things, eventually something's going to go wrong with them, or you're going to lose it altogether. And then what? And even when things are great, also then what, right? To what you said earlier. And so I think that's such a big thing I know for you and I, of when your identity is rooted on something that is actually outside of you in the being that is God. And once you like learn about who God actually is more and really just get to understand his character and who he really is, you understand that's exactly where I want to put my identity, because that's not going away. All these other things, the relationship, all this stuff that I've tried to find security in for all these years have led me here. And right, it's God saying, hey, look at me, right?
Even asking the question, who are you? And periodically, even throughout your life, I think the first sentence that you think of or the first thought that you have is probably what your identity is in. And for a really long time, I would say, like, I'm a powerlifter, or I'm an influencer, I'm a teacher, I am, the only daughter to my parents, I am this or that. And I think not that any of those things are inherently bad, but if that's the first thing that you call yourself, then chances are that's the first thing you run to when you're looking for fulfillment. And I think, a lot of people, if you were to ask them, like, who are you? They would either say, I don't know, or they would immediately say, I am, and then insert title, status, job title, hobby, before they even mention, I am a follower of Christ, or I am God's child. And I think if you were to ask them, okay, what if that got taken from you right now? How would you feel? And then it's, well, I would be destroyed. Like, I wouldn't know how to go on. And so I think it's, even asking yourself, like, who am I, can be at least a starting point to kind of figuring out, like, where am I tying my identity to?
No, I love that. I think, yeah, that's such a tangible way to kind of figure this out that we'll get into kind of more of those, I think, in a little bit. But yeah, like, it's such a weird question. But yeah, when someone asks you, hey, like, I don't think anyone would ask you, hey, who are you? But like, you know what I mean? Like your name, but like, yeah, what do you do really is mostly the answer.
Right. But if you think about that question of itself, what do you do? It's an action. It's just something that you do, but it's not who you are. Yeah. So, but we tie it to who I am. Like if someone asks me like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a teacher. Yeah. It's like, I teach, but being a teacher isn't the only thing about me, but it's just, I think as a culture and as a society, it's just kind of become the way to talk about yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And I think just to hit on the cultural versus Christian view of identity, in preparing for this, I wrote down the cultural view says, find yourself, be whoever you want to be. Who you are is what you do, the titles you have. It's rooted in kind of what you decide it is, and the Christian view says you're not your achievements, your failures, your sexuality, your job title, your trauma, your desires. You are rooted in who God says you are, and more importantly, in who God is. It's outside of us, which is more steady, because we screw up all the time, right? Oh, yeah. And so, like, look, I've said so many times, like, be whoever you want to be and all that stuff. And, like, there's probably some middle ground here, right? Like, I think there's both, but I think the biggest thing is it's outside of you. And when it's outside of you and you kind of know who that person is, of who God is, it's like there's nowhere else I would want to put my identity. And also, I did some writing this week to think about this more, and I came up with a house metaphor that I think is a pretty good one. It's almost like an essay that I wrote about identity, but using a house as a metaphor. And I just want to read that real quick. And so, growing up, let's start that over. Growing up, others build the foundation of your house. Parents, friends, culture, school, sports, religion, all those things tell you who you are. They shape your beliefs, what's good, what's bad, what to do, what not to do. And over time, those beliefs from external influences shape who you are. So that's your house that you essentially grow up with, right? Now, where the quarter lifer tension comes from is when we're still living in that same house that others built for us when we're 25, 28, 31. the same house that was built for us for the first 20 years of our life. And that tension feels like you're literally living in someone else's house. Like you kind of outgrow it. Like this just isn't me anymore. And you start to feel that tension. And as that tension builds, we get to a point in our 20s or 30s where we walk into that house with a sledgehammer because we realize we need to build our own, right? And some people do a complete tear down. Some people just do some renovations. But you start tearing down old walls that no longer serve you. You repaint certain beliefs. You add new rooms. You question the layout. And it's messy, but it's yours now. And just to stop there, because there is more. Like I feel like to go back to your story, Mariana, like those, you kind of knocked the house down a couple times, right? And rebuilt it on a foundation that was teaching, fitness, all these other things that eventually the house did continue to get knocked down. And then you find God and it's like, that's the foundation. And so, as I was writing this, I kind of stopped there, but then I realized like, all right, well, there's something missing. And for us, like the God part of it is missing. And just to hit on that, identity in God means when you walk into that childhood house and tear it down, you tear it down completely. But the foundation of that house, to what I said earlier, now becomes who God is. He is the foundation. And when that is right, he then shows you how to build the rest of it. And the rest of it are those other rooms in your house. Things like your true personality, like who he actually created you to be, your strengths, your weaknesses, things you love to do, your roles, titles, things he's called you to, relationships he's called you into. For you, right? Like the fitness, those things, like being a teacher, like those things are rooms in your house, but you made them the foundation, and that's where things crumbled. And again, like those things represent the rooms, but when God is truly the foundation, that's where things really turn. And so the cultural view says one of those rooms should be the foundation. But the problem with that is when that foundation is what you do, when that foundation is what you do, the title you have, the relationship, the house crumbles when that thing crumbles. But when God is the foundation, your house cannot fall down because it has nothing to do with you. Rather, it has everything to do with who he is. And who he is loving, accepting, merciful, forgiving, all-powerful, all-knowing. And so when you're finished rebuilding your house, you're living in a house that he built exactly for you. One that is steady, one that will continue to be renovated as you grow, as you change, as you develop, but one that will never get torn down. And, when things go wrong with one room, you rely on that foundation of who God is. And so I hope that paints a better picture of identity. And, to pull some scripture into it, this whole house metaphor, Matthew 7:24-26. This is at the end of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, which is his biggest sermon. And he says, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse because it is built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. And I mean, man, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's your story. It's my story. And to me, it's like, that's the Jesus's like drop the mic moment that he like ends the Sermon on the Mount with, that basically saying like, hey guys, if you've been here listening to me this whole time and you kind of don't follow it, like you're going to continue to find your identity in those things that are actually just built on sand. And when things go wrong with that thing, that your house is going to wash away. And so, like, all that to say, I think all those rooms in your house, they're good things. The relationship, the fitness, the job, all those things are good things. But when you make them the foundation of your house, that's where that's where things can go wrong, like to your point. And the biggest thing, the biggest difference, and I feel like I'm harping on it, but it's identity found in God is it's outside of you. So no matter how much you screw up, no matter how much life sucks, or you do things that are wrong, or you just whatever, you have that injury, you are rooted in something that is above that. Like Scottie is rooted in something that is greater than how well he does at a golf tournament. Does he feel that sense of accomplishment when he wins? Absolutely. He loves it. He loves working hard towards it. And he says this in the same interview, does it suck when he loses? Absolutely. But the roller coaster is less bumpy when the identity is rooted in Christ. And I'm not saying you're perfect or I'm perfect, that we found Christ, or our identity is really found in Christ now. But I think it's just a good concept that hopefully paints a better picture of identity a little bit better. So
definitely going off of everything you just said, which is so spot on. I think it's a never-ending struggle. I think there's going to be, different points in your life where you're going to feel extremely rooted in Christ and your walk is going super well. And then sometimes we derail. And I know that it still happens for me to time where like, all right, I'm getting back into my fitness thing, but let me be cautious of not letting it become everything. And I think, again, having those setbacks in the past helps you be able to be cautious as you move forward. But like you said, it's something that you continuously have to work on. And there might be things 10 years from now that might pop up where I'm like, oh, I want to maybe put my identity in this. But I think God has such a kind and loving way of reminding us and nudging us sometimes, being like, hey, before you get a little too into this, don't forget like what's happened before. And, I'm here for you and I want to be the identity for you. But yeah, I think it's a everyday battle sometimes to, wake up and, all right, I'm not only this, like, but I know at the end of the day, no matter what, like a child of God, and that can't get taken away from me. Which is reassuring at the same time and should provide comfort. Like, yes, I'm going to screw up. Yes, I'm going to make mistakes, but I can still have the assurance that God is my foundation.
Yeah, 100%. And I've thought about your identity as like a pie chart. And what I mean by that is, right, like perfect world, I guess identity is rooted in God 100% of the pie
time.
is that.
100% of the
but
time.
Realistically, like that's a good goal to have, but that's not always the case, right? To your point. I feel like for me, it's like, I don't know, sometimes it feels like 50% God, 40% work, 10%, I don't know, just friends, family, like those things. And I think that's something that I still definitely struggle with, is not making my work my identity, because I mean, just the whole time aspect, how much time I spend working and especially being an entrepreneur and trying to build your own thing. Like, it's so easy to put your identity in this thing. Like, literally last night, talking about social media and TikTok, like your following is way larger than mine, but like my best performing video view wise, I think it's like, I don't know, 3,800 views. Like, and that was the first time I got over 1,000. Just been posting for the last month and a half, and it's like you're kind of like fired up a little bit. Like, let's go. Yeah, it's cool, right? And I think I've detached myself a little bit more from that, but it's hard not to. Obviously you can appreciate it for what it is, but right, like don't make it your ultimate thing, because also I know a bunch of the other videos are getting 100 views and nothing. So just detaching myself from that, I think, is a challenge. And I think where I've noticed that the most is like, what's the thing, I wrote this down the other day, like what's the thing that gives you the most joy when it's going well and yet the most pain when it's not going well? Like that thing that gives you those roller coaster emotions, again, talking about identifying where your identity is at, that I think is another good indicator of what is that thing that gives you that roller coaster. Your identity is probably in that. And I feel that a lot. Like my mood when things are going well, work wise, is unbelievable. But when things are not going well, and a lot of times, like building a business, things are not going well a lot of the time. And so it's hard. And so that's why, right, for me at least, that's where I still struggle. But knowing that with where my faith is and where like I know I need my identity to be and where I strive to be with it in Christ, like at the end of the day also too, it's not always up to me, right? Like God's in control always with that stuff. But I think something that I always go back to when I am struggling with some of this is Matthew 6:30. Like this is probably my favorite verse, and I always go back to it when times are hard. Is if God cares so wonderfully for wildflowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, he will certainly care for you. Why do you have so little faith? And I say that because, right, the roller coaster, when things are going bad, I always try and ground myself in who God is, because that verse tells me, hey, like God cares about the freaking flowers outside. Like just look around and see how that, like obviously you're way more valuable to him than those things. And so it's kind of just like a stop freaking out. And I love the, in my translation, like the why do you have so little faith? I think every time I've read that, I kind of almost chuckle a little bit, because it's just a flat out, like, why do you have so little?
Out. Yeah.
Yeah. And I never have a good enough answer. And so because of that, I think it's a reminder for me of at least where my identity should be at, but it's still a struggle oftentimes when, the business isn't where I want to be, and financial things and all this stuff, like these things do stress you out and can get in the way. But I think it's also helped me to just let go and kind of let God, and verses like that always bring me back to he's in control. You're not as much in control as you think. You could work as hard as you possibly want, and at the end of the day, it's going to be him that makes it happen, that gives you the success. It's not necessarily anything that you do.
And to go off of that, and this could be a whole other podcast, so I'll try to keep it short, but the stronger that your identity becomes in Christ, your perspective on so many aspects of your life begins to change. And even like before, when you mentioned like only getting 300 views or 3,800 views, but when you zoom out and you're like, that is 300 people I wouldn't have even spoken to today or even seen out, in a physical sense. So the fact that there's 300 people wherever they may be in the world that is seeing this video, that's a huge accomplishment. But again, it's that perspective shift of, well, what is this showing me? What is this teaching me? How can I look at this from a different way? Because I know that God wants good for me. Basically what you just read from that verse, it's like, well, if God takes care of the flowers and the birds, like, of course he's even more so going to take care of me. So what is this situation or this moment trying to teach me, rather than, this is just bad, like this is going poorly, like I'm not getting enough views or engagement, whatever it is. It's like, well, maybe this is where it needs to be right now, kind of thing. But it's hard to get yourself in that space if you're not, even when you are deeply rooted in Christ, like you still have those moments of doubt.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's God also renovating your rooms in a way. When I think,
great,
when you're really struggling, it's how is he making, because to me the goal is to become the ultimate version of you, and we would say become the most like Jesus as you possibly can be, like in terms of just what the kind of goal of life down here is. And yeah, I think those hard times, the difficulty, that's God renovating your rooms or tearing down your house completely and saying, hey, look at me. Whether, whether you are kind of rooted in or think you're rooted in him and you're really not, or you don't know who God is at all. But I think, maybe for the non-believers kind of listening, I think that verse, he will certainly care for you, like that applies to you too. And it's just a little bit of a glimpse of who God is. Like the more you read the Bible, the more you just start to understand who God is, and he'll wake you up by taking away all this stuff like we've talked about. But it's just a little glimpse of who God is. And again, when that's where your foundation is of your house, the uncertainty of life and the bad things that are inevitably going to happen that do suck, it's just a room that's getting renovated, but your foundation remains strong. And something else too that I think is important, and just making identity a little bit more clear. How do we figure out where our identity is rooted in? Kind of questions to ask yourself beyond what we've talked about. I've thought about in my past, before God kind of woke me up, and now still, right? Like, who is your inner voice, right? Again, like, who are you? McConaughey, when everything's stripped away, what's left? And I think that's another thing that I think there's a saying that's like, there's 3 versions of us: a public version, a private version, and a secret version. And the public one is obviously who everyone normally sees, you on social media, so to speak. And then your private one is your close friends and family, how they see you. And then the secret one is the one that no one sees, when no one's around, when it's just whether your thoughts in your head or literally who you are when you're alone. But I think that secret version of you will tell you a lot about who you are too. It's the judgments that you have on yourself or other people, that internal self-talk. It's also the things that give you joy, things that make you cry, things that make you feel love. Like those things that are truly on the inside, like that hit your heart, that hit your soul, those things I think are also a pretty good reflection of who you are, outside of necessarily God, and everything that we've already talked about. Just another way to think about identity, to give kind of like an alternative kind of view. I think that's important, because I know in my past, 20 pre relationship with God version of Brian definitely had a lot of didn't have a great inner voice, definitely with myself, with other people. Like who I was on the inside did not match who I was on the outside. And so I think for anyone listening, it's like, well, who is that version of you on the inside? And how can it's integrity. How can we make that internal version, a little bit lighter, a little bit, I guess, more godlike, so to speak, and make it hopefully match the public and private version a little bit more. Because I think also when you do that, I've found it's such a less stressful way to live your life too, because you're not wearing a mask with every room that you walk in. Like, all right, I'm talking to these people, I got to be this kind of person, or I'm in this group or in this setting, I got to be that person. And that's not to say that, yeah, you change a little bit depending on who you're with, but when your identity changes altogether based on whatever room you're in, whether you're alone or with other people, I think that's where it can be a little bit of a caution too.
Yeah, going off of that too, it can be uncomfortable to even ask yourself that question of who you are in secret. And I think a lot of times we tend to ignore who we are in secret because we don't necessarily like that version of ourselves or that portion of our identity. And so, yeah, on the outside in these social settings, I am like this and that's awesome. But then if you really reflect, it's like, well, is that matching my inner voice, kind of to your point? But even when it is uncomfortable, it's a necessary kind of self-evaluation of like, where am I rooting my inner voice and my inner thoughts? And is that who I should be? Yeah. And if it's not, then I think that's also a starting point of like, okay, well, what can I start doing to kind of counter, the inner voices or the inner thoughts that really don't reflect who I want to be, but because you get comfortable sometimes too in your own negative self-talk. And I think sometimes people find identities in their chaos and in their trauma and in the difficulties that they've experienced in their past, because that's what they've normalized, or that's the narrative that they've gotten used to. And it's like, I've seen people on social media just say like, well, that's just who I am, and that's just how I am like. And to an extent, sure, but you don't have to be that way. And I think sometimes we just get comfortable in the negative or in the types of ways that we act because it's what we're used to. And again, even for the non-believer, it's like, you don't have to accept that. You don't have to accept that version of yourself, because God gives you a new identity, and he says that we're a new creation in him. And I think just, having that reminder at the end of the day, because again, like I mentioned before, like this is a constant struggle, and there are days where my inner voice is not good and I am ruthless towards myself. But then remembering like, wait, God doesn't see me that way, and that's not the version of myself that God has intended for me, definitely helps to, like you said before, match the outside that you portray to other people. That a lot of times that is how I want to be. Like I want to be positive and I want to uplift myself and others, but internally that doesn't always happen.
No, 100%. And I think to your point just about other people, it made me think of this idea that I've mentioned before of just the people around you put you in a box. And what I mean by that is, to the point about just your identity, who you are, is ever changing in a sense. Like that's more of like the cultural worldview version would say that. And I do think that's true, but where it's really rooted, like in Christ, like that's, again, it's outside of who you are. God is not changing, but you as a person do change over time. So I think it's a little bit of both. Hopefully that makes sense. I think what I'm getting at is you can decide at any point that you don't want to be this person anymore. And I don't say that to go against what I said before about like the cultural view as who you decide to be and all that stuff. Like I said before, I think there is kind of, it's gray sometimes, and I'm not an identity expert, so just trying to make sense of this. But, my point is that sometimes that tension, to go back to earlier, you feel that tension of, I am not living and acting true to who I know I am, and that is not a fun place to be. And so I think when we feel that tension of, well, I kind of want to be different than normal, I kind of want to do something different than maybe what my friends are doing, and just start to feel those identity shifts, there's a sense of fear that definitely comes with that, because the people around you, especially people that you might have grown up with, they know you as this person. And when you break those walls of that box that they put you in, and you kind of put yourself in, that's uncomfortable for other people. It's like, Brian, you're not supposed to be this person. Like, stop. And I've gone through that myself. And I think at the end of the day, your friends are your friends. They're gonna love you for who you are, and it's a good thing. Like, we're all supposed to change. We're not supposed to be that. It's the house metaphor again. You're not supposed to be that same house that you were when you were 12, 18, 22. Like it is ever changing. You're constantly renovating those rooms as we get older and as we just continue to develop. And so, Mariana, for you, like, what are some things to kind of wrap this up? Anything else come to mind in terms of what we can do, what people can do to continue to learn about who they are and develop, whether from a Christian perspective or just like a learning about yourself and who you are?
Sure. I mean, from a Christian standpoint, at least something that I just remind myself is like, I can always go back to baseline, which is God. You can deviate sometimes, and not to say that you should necessarily, but it's bound to happen just because of our human flaws and human nature. But that assurance that I can go back to Christ and he is there and he wants to be my foundation, I think takes the pressure off a little bit, where it's like, you know, there are times where I go to the gym and I get so worked up about like, you know, performance, and I've gotten into at least a routine for myself is like before I go into the gym, like I'll sit in my car or on my drive over and I'll just like say a short prayer to myself, like, God, help me to let this workout just be a way to glorify you and not myself. And I think just having those moments and those instances of reminders, like kind of just checking yourself, like, am I doing this for my own glory and my own validation, or how can I do X, Y, or Z thing, which are all good things, but with the perspective of how can I glorify God in this? And I think that mentality shift just kind of helps put things into perspective for me, because I know that it's easy to just wrap yourself up in something, especially if it's going well. Yeah. So I think just having that reminder of like, how can I bring God into this? Because he's already given me this. So he wants me to have it, or he wants me to have an experience with this. How can I, you know, envelop him in all of it rather than what can I get out of it for myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think too, like, as we're talking about all this, you know, if you're someone that is like, great, man, like all this God stuff, you know, I think, and maybe you're sparked by it, turned on by it, like you're interested in it. You know, what I would say to make this a little bit more tangible is like, just download the Bible app. There's literally a free Bible app. I think that's literally what it's called, the Bible app. And start with Matthew. Like I quoted Matthew a couple times. That's the beginning of the New Testament where Jesus comes into the picture. I would set it to, my Bible version is the NLT, New Living Translation. That's the only Bible I've ever had. I think it's the most easy to understand. So if you're starting there, or if you're just starting, I would recommend that one. But, you know, I say that because, again, how do we make this more tangible? And the identity piece being rooted in who God is, the best way to learn about who God is by reading the book about him. So, and who Jesus is and all that stuff. So, that's something. And then something else that's come to mind for me, and just thinking about those rooms outside of, you know, who I am necessarily in just Christ. I don't like the wording of that, but, you know, I would just say, like, try so many new things. I think I've found, especially in my 20s, just not being afraid to try anything. You know, go for a run at 5 a.m. Like, I made a video about that this winter. Like, I went for a 5 a.m. run or 6 a.m. run. It was like 12 degrees in January. And I liked it. You know, I found some joy in it, some just grit in it. Not that it's my end all be all, but, you know, if I don't do that, I don't know that I like it, and I don't continue to do it, you know, and I think there's a lot of other things. It's like trying a new food, you know, even just career wise, you know, being in engineering, realizing that was just not for me at all, but going into the exact opposite end of starting my own business, and just, I don't know, I think dipping your toe in a lot of different things from a personal standpoint, from a career standpoint, you know, maybe just also just relationships, being single, embracing that if you are single and appreciating that, or being in a relationship, you know, I think in a nutshell, that's a big part of the quarter lifer experience, is just how do we figure out who we are and what our identity is, who we are, right? You have to do things. You have to try things. Otherwise, you're not going to know that you like it. You're not going to learn about yourself. Those rooms that God has kind of created for you, like, you're not going to figure out what those rooms are unless you try it and figure out, all right, well, I didn't really like that. cool. Like, we can cross that off the list. Well, I really love that. Then maybe I should run towards that a little bit more. And I think you do that over time, then you'll really learn a whole lot about yourself. And that's just an outside of God necessarily example of how we can develop our identity too.
Yeah, and just to kind of wrap up, at least from where I'm at currently after going through all of these identity struggles, being on the other side of it for now, at least, because I'm sure there'll be another point where more identity struggles kind of come up. But, there is a refinement that comes from it, and there is growth that comes from it, and there is so much that you learn from going through these kind of identity crises. And I don't think it's something that you can shy away from either. It's not something that you can avoid. I think at one point or another, you have gone through it, are going through it. Other people might be listening and being like, oh no, I'm good. My identity is solid. Like, I'm chilling. And, it probably won't always be like that. And that's okay too. And I think as you get older, you get more okay with the idea of things being a struggle, if that makes sense. And obviously there's going to be moments where you don't even know how to get through them, but knowing that, all right, if I've gone through something similar in the past and I came out okay, like, it will be okay again. So it is temporary and it is momentary. And, something that my fiance tells me all the time, he's like, this is just a moment in time and it's not the only moment. And, there will be something that comes from this eventually. And I know that's kind of hard to see when you're in the thick of it, but, if this is of any encouragement to anyone, like, you will come out on the other side and there will be progress from it. And you can look back and be like, wow, like, I was able to get through those moments or that circumstance or that trial or whatever it is, and I'm okay right now. So I think it's just a good reminder for myself included that, there is another side to this if you're going through it in the moment.
Yeah, no, 100%. I love that. And yeah, I mean, if you talked to me a few months ago, I kind of started down this quarter life clarity thing thinking like, I got all this clarity, like, you guys listen to me. And then God kind of like so graciously humbled me of like, dude, you don't have anything figured out. And I'm really glad that happened. And yeah, I think, just on that, to your point, like, the whole, like, embracing the whole quarter life crisis, chaos, identity, struggles, who am I, trying to find my place in the world, all this stuff. I think embracing that is really important as we are just toddlers like adult toddlers. Like, we've said that before on this show, but it's so true. We try to jump ahead. We try to figure it all out and get our life perfectly in order when it's just not going to be possible, right now. And so I think embracing kind of the discomfort of, yeah, man, I don't know really who I am necessarily yet. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to find who I am and kind of what to do with my life. I've been there, and it does suck and it is hard, but I think taking those little wins is important too. I remember when I was really trying to figure out more so what to do with my life and not necessarily who I am, so to speak. Little things that were very encouraging to me to, one, remind myself that God's got it, but also that, like, everything is going to be okay. Everything is going to work out. This is just a part of it, right? If the goal is to become your best self or more like Jesus, those things, these identity refinements, like you said, are necessary. But we hate being put in the fire. But I think a reminder for me that has helped is when we're in the fire, like, God's hand is right over us. Like, he's holding us in the fire and he knows exactly when to pull us out. And I think I feel that on a micro level day to day when things are like dry seasons with personal, with life, with the business and stuff. But I think every time I've kind of had those moments or those seasons, something I always like to say is like, he will provide. And like that has certainly been my experience. But yeah, I mean, to kind of close, to wrap everything up, like it's hard to be our age right now. That's why we're doing this stuff. That's why we're talking about it. But you know, who you are, I think, is essential in so many things, and figuring out what to do with your life and all that. And hopefully Mariana sharing her story and kind of what we talked about today has helped you understand this whole idea a little bit better.